SAP developers. In this new SAP Tech Bytes video, we're going to keep exploring the SAP Audit Log Service. In the previous video, we created an integration flow and we were able to interact with the API using SAP Cloud Integration. In this video, we are going to extend that scenario. But in this instance, we're just going to be storing the audit log entries in the object store. As an object store, we're going to use S3. In order to be able to communicate from SAP Cloud Integration to S3, we're going to use another component of the SAP Integration Suite. In this case, it will be Open Connectors. So we're going to create in Open Connectors an instance of S3. We're going to use the credentials that we generate from the object store in BTP and then configure that in Open Connectors. And then we're going to see how we configure all this in the integration flow so that we can end up sending the audit log entries that we extract via the API and store them in the object store. Underlying the object store is AWS S3. Okay, so we're going to start by instantiating the object store. And for that, we're just going to use the Cloud Foundry command line interface. Okay, so let's start with CDF create service and then object store, right? And we define the plan, which is just standard, and we set a name. Okay, let's name it audit log object store. Perfect. So here we're creating an instance of the service. Okay, that looks fine. And let's see the progress of this now. Creation in progress. And we can see that it has been created successfully. Okay, so now let's just create a service key for it. Right. So audit log object store, and then we just define our service key. Escape. Cool. So we created our key, and then we're just going to get the service key. Service key for that, right? Audit log. Excellent. There you go. So now I have my service key, and what I can do now is that I can just test the service key, right? Make sure that in this case, the object store is instantiated in AWS, and we can see if these credentials are okay. To do that, we could just use the AWS command line interface. Okay, so in this case, I need to start by configuring the AWS client. Yeah. So the access key ID, that's it. The secret key is this one here. I'll copy that. Excellent. Default region, let's just set that the default region is EU Central 1, which is the one that appears here. Okay, and that's okay. So now if I want to do S3, sorry. If I want to query the bucket, for example, let's just copy this value here. Let's see if there's anything there. You can see that it's empty now. Okay, so for example, I can do a copy as well. S3, CP, do I have a file here? Yeah, file. And I'm just going to copy it to S3, the bucket, yeah. And now if we do an LS again, we can see that our file is there, right? So let's just remove that file. We don't need it. This was just a test to make sure that we are able to write to that. Okay. Excellent, that has been deleted. Okay, so now that we have credentials to access the object store, for this SAP Tech Bytes, what we're going to do is that we're going to configure those credentials in Open Connectors. And then in Cloud Integration, we are going to use those Open Connectors in order to basically send our file from the payload that we extract from the audit log, we're going to send it to AWS S3, and we're going to use open connectors to simplify that. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is that I'm going to switch to open connectors. Okay, so here in open connectors, and as you can see, for example, here we have S3 is available. We can have a look at what the connector is, the different APIs that there are. In our case, we're going to use this files API in order to create that file in AWS. Okay, so for that, let's start by creating an instance. So we click here, create instance. Let's search for AWS S3, and here you can see that you can see that it's asking us for an access key. It's asking the secret access key as well, and also our bucket name and the region endpoint, which are all the details that we were able to find here, right? So we're just going to copy and paste those values to our instance here. So access key, bucket, I have it here, so copy that. Then my secret access key, copy that. Excellent, and then here EU central 1. That's okay. Okay, so now I create instance, and you can see that basically that's my instance created. Now I can do files. I'm just going to retrieve all files. Let's try this out. Are there any files there? It's an invalid path, okay, because I think this is an error because we have no file. So let's just upload a file. Let's say that we want to upload to XYZ file.txt, and that's where we're going to store our file. Okay, let's browse for a file here. Just going to use that file.txt that I used before. Let's execute that. And you can see that this is successful. So I was able to create the file in AWS S3. Okay. So I was able to create the file here, and what we can see here is basically the API request that we need to do from Cloud Integration in order for us to create that file in AWS. As you can see here, this is my base URL. This is the path where I want to store the file, and we're going to define this path also in Cloud Integration. And here's the authorization, multipart from data, and then we just specify what is it that we're going to send. A successful response will give me a response payload like this. Okay. Now, if we want to retrieve that file, we can retrieve it here. So get files. Let's try this again. We named it XYZ file.txt. Let's execute this. And we can see now that we have a 200. So this is successful, and we can download the file from here. Right. Okay. So we are good in open connectors now. Now what we're going to do is that, let me just copy these values, because these values we will need to configure it in my credentials. Okay, so copy this. Yep, excellent. Okay, so now let's go to Cloud Integration. What we are going to do now is that we're going to create the credentials in here because we need that in order to connect to open connectors. And then we're going to make a copy of this of our previous integration flow. This is the integration flow that we completed in the previous Tech Bytes series. We're just going to make a copy of it, and we're going to extend it. Okay, so let's start by creating the credentials here. Security material, and then we just create user credentials. We select open connectors here, and we're just going to name it like this. Okay, yeah, that's fine. So user is basically those details that we end up copying from Cloud Connector. From open connectors is what we copied here. So the user, the organization, and the element, right? So all of this, just to show them again, it's basically what we have here as an authorization, and that's what we need. Okay, so let's deploy this. Cool. So we have our credentials there, and let's just go back to cloud integration. Okay, Audit Log Management, and we're going to make a copy of this. Copy this. Yeah, and we're going to name it objectStore. Okay, copy. Okay, so in this case, we can do some changes here. We no longer need to store it in the data store. So we're able to remove this bit here and this double payload. I want to leave it clean. So given that we don't need it anymore, then we're just going to remove those unneeded blocks there. Also, now that we have, let's remember what we did here in process our response. So in process response, at the moment, what we have is that it checks for the paging response header, and based on this, it will either continue iterating or it will stop the integration flow, right? So that's all that we have right now. Okay, now if you remember well from creating our file, we need to do multipart form data. This is how we need to send the data to, that's the content type. That's how we need to send the data to Open Connector so that we are able to create a file in AWS S3. This is something that I've explored before, hence why I have this blog post open here. So what are we going to do is that we are going to set, the content type and the message body using the content modifier. There is an error that I'm getting whenever I use Open Connectors. So in order to avoid it, I'm just going to use the HTTP receiver adapter. Okay. If you want to understand the details on why am I doing that and what's the error that I'm getting, I recommend reading this blog post. From here onwards, it will explain you what's the problem that I'm getting. Okay. Also, part of the script that I'm going to use in a bit, which I'm going to explain, also takes care of some of the problems that you can end up facing there. Okay, so now I'm going to add a content modifier. Okay, so in this case, I'm just going to name it content type and body. This is what I'm going to do, right? So here I'm going to add a header that's called content type. And this would just be a constant, correct? I'm just going to copy the value here so I don't have to type all this. As you can see here, multipart form data, and I'll just end up setting a boundary, right? This is just a unique value. Okay, and then as the message body, I'll set it as an expression, and my message body is just going to be this. Give me a second. Okay, you can see that the boundary is the same that are defined in the header. And here, what this is going to do is that's just going to set whatever is in the exchange as the body. It will set it as the value here. It's application JSON because the response from the Audit Log API, it's a type of JSON, and this is it. So this is how we end up defining this as our body. Okay, then. If you read this blog post, it tells you that you need to do some post-processing on that payload. We need to remove the carriage lines and replace it with /r/n instead of just being /n. You can see the details here, and that's what we're going to do in this integration flow as well. So we're going to create a script, right? So script, yeah, a Groovy script. And then this Groovy script, I'm just going to, I'm going to name it prepare payload because I'm just preparing the payload that will be sent to Open Connectors. I'm going to use the same Groovy file that I have here. And then what I need to do now is that I need to modify something. So I'm going to add another another method, and this method is just to basically to prepare the payload, right? Let me just copy what I prepared, and we're going to go through the payload, through the script so that you can see exactly what's happening. Okay, let's make this a bit bigger. Okay, so this is the new method, prepare payload, and what I'm going to do first is that I'm going to, given that I am going to use the HTTP receiver adapter, I'm unable to use I am using the Open Connector credentials that we created, but I'm just extracting the values using a script. In this case, give me a sec, I need to define a couple of things here before as well. Some imports that I'm missing. Yep, okay. So in this case, what I'm doing is that I'm accessing the secure store via script, and I'm retrieving the credentials based on a property that I need to create now. So I forgot defining this property. We're going to define it, and then based on the value there, then it's going to extract the credentials from the secure store, and then we are going to set the password of that as an authorization. So when we do for an Open Connectors type credential get password, then what it's going to return to us is basically this string that we have here. So user, the organization, and the element. That's our password, and that's what we're going to set as the authorization header. Remember that this is how we're sending it here, authorization, right? Great. So then apart from that, what I'm doing here is that I need to define a file name and a folder structure in my object store. For simplicity purposes, what I'm doing is that I'm just going to use the time from and the time to that we send as request parameters. And using that data that's there, I'm going to create the file name and the path. So here you can see that what I do is that if the date, so for example, remember that we can use this integration flow to extract the data for a week or a day or a period longer than that, maybe for a month, something like that. So what I'm doing is that if, for example, we run this on a daily basis, then maybe we want our file name to follow this format, right? Year, month, date. And I want to store it in a folder structure that goes year/month/the file name. Okay, and that's what I'm doing here. So I'm just setting the file name. If the date from and the date to is the same, then I'm just using that same date as the file name. Remember that we need to take care of the loop index. So the loop index is if we have more data than the one that the API returns in a single request, then we need to iterate. So I'm also taking in consideration that loop index in my file name because we can have multiple responses for a single day, right? Or if we have a day range, so in this case, let's say a month, it is very likely that we're going to have more than one file. So in that case, I'm just going to iterate through that. And that's why I take in consideration the loop index. So this bit of code here is just to set my file name and my folder structure. Okay. Now the last bit here. So we need to remove those problematic characters that we are defining, that we explained, here. And this is what I mentioned before. I'm just replacing this the /n's with /r/n, and in that case, so backward slash, and in this case is it's just these characters. If we send the payload with these characters, it will fail. It is explained in that blog post, so go through it to understand this. And in this case, I'm just replacing them with /r/n. Okay, and once we have that, basically our payload is ready for us to send. Remember that we need to define a new property. So for that, in our properties here that we have here, I'm just going to define a new property, right? That new property was called objectStoreCredentials. And it will be similar to the other ones, an XPath, and it will be parameters, objectStoreCredentials. And then the data type is string. And that's it. So we need to add this new parameter in our request. when we send up the request to our integration flow. Okay, so let's save this. Alrighty, that should be fine there. And here, what we need to do now, I have my prepared payload. Perfect. I haven't defined what is it that I'm going to do here. I'm sorry. So we define prepare payload. I just need to set it here in my script function. That is fine. And now I need to do a request reply, because this we are sending it to Cloud Connector. No, sorry, to Open Connectors. Apologies. And I'm just going to name it post of files. Okay. Then what we need is receiver. Okay. So here we're just going to Open Connectors, AWS S3. Okay. We're going to connect this, and we select the HTTP adapter. Okay. Now we need to apologies. And now we need to configure this connection. Okay. So our address is basically what we found here. Correct. This is my post files, and my address is basically this. Yeah, files. So let's copy this from here. Correct. Now our query parameters is what we need to define. In this case, we only have a path that we need to copy here. So I'm just going to set that path. There we go. So my path is I'm going to start in something that's called audit log entries. Then I set the year, the month. This is what I was mentioning about the path that we were defining in our script. So first the year, then the month, and then the file name, right? That we set in our script. Proxy type internet. Then our method is post. Authentication. We are going to set it to none, because the authentication, we are setting it in our script, right? That authorization header will also go here. So we're just going to set this request headers like that. And then this should be ready. Okay, so we've defined our integration flow. Now let's save this and let's deploy this. Okay. Okay, so this has been deployed. And now let's move to Postman. In Postman, you can see that I've added a new parameter. This is what we've defined as the parameter in my properties. Okay, so this is basically ready. So let's see. Today is the 4th of July. I'm just going to extract anything that might be there for our audit log. So if we send this, let's see if this works. Okay, seems like there's an HTTP error, 400 bad request. Okay, we will need to check that. But it looks like it's trying to communicate with Open Connectors, which is fine. We see our path there. Audit log entries, JSON, yeah, 400 bad request. So let's check what the problem is then. Okay, so I found the error that I was getting. So I was getting a 400 byte request, which got me thinking what the problem might be regarding maybe something in my payload, something in the headers that I have defined. And I found that the problem was here. So let's see. So in content type, I ended up defining the boundary here. But you can see here that the boundary finishes in 666. And then in my body, it actually finishes in 667. So if I update that to 667, then I'm just going to save that and then deploy it. And basically, a problem when I was doing the copy pasting of the values, I didn't copy that 7 in the end. So be careful about that. The content type, that boundary needs to match exactly what you define in your body. So hence why I was getting that problem. So I'll deploy this again. Let's wait for it to be ready. And once ready, I can send a request again, and then we will see the how it goes. So now going back to Postman, let's hit send here again. And we can see that this was successful. So I get 200. It tells me that it has created a file there for that period of time. So in this case, for the 4th of July, you can see here that it has defined that value there. So let's just change this to, let's say that I want from the 1st of July to the 3rd of July. And if I send this now, it will also create a file, but then you can see that the file name is different. It's stored under 2022, July, and then it tells me that this file contains all the data from here. So what if I do from the 6th, from all of June, right? So yeah, let's just do that to the 3rd of June. Maybe it has more than one file. And it will be able to see, yeah, this looks like it has more than one file. So you can see that it finishes in _2. So I had to iterate 2 times, and the 3rd time was the last time that it sent a request. So we can see all these files in our object store now. So let's jump to our terminal. And for that, I'm just going to do, let me copy this bucket name again. AWS S3, then ls, right? I need to specify my bucket here. Yeah, and then we can see here that in my paths, I have audit log entries, which is what I've defined, 2022. And then we can see here that I have for 2 months, right? 06 and 07. Let's just check 07. And we can see here all the files that were created. One that was for a specific date, and one that was for a date range, right? From the 1st to the 3rd of July. So let's see, 6. And we can see here that when we extracted the whole month of June, then it actually created 3 files. So I had to go to the API a couple of times and then getting this files here. And that's it. So we've seen, for example, how we can use SAP Cloud Integration to interact with the SAP Audit Log Service. We've called the API, we've extracted the audit log entries that are available for a particular time range, and then we've stored those audit log entries in the SAP Object Store. As an object store, we were using AWS S3. We also use the command line interface to see, for example, the files, to validate our credentials, to even create files, and we then use those credentials to configure it in open connectors. And we saw how, for example, we can create a connection to AWS S3 using open connectors in SAP Cloud Integration. So I would say that that's a wrap. We've seen the SAP Audit Log Service. I hope you're now a bit more familiar with the SAP Audit Log Service, and you feel confident enough to interact with the API, and not just that, but also if you have a particular need of actually keeping those logs for longer than 90 days, which is the retention limit that there is in a Cloud Foundry environment, then that you will use the API to extract those audit log entries and store them in an external repository.